A lot of your colleagues died from drugs, from heroin. You had a heroin habit. You kicked it cold turkey and went on. How did you stop?
I looked in the mirror one day and I just stopped. I went out to my father's place. He had a couple hundred acres of land. And I went out and he had two compartments like this with his guests. So I went and locked the door. And I stayed there for about 5 days before I could get up. And that was it.
That did it.
Every day does it. You know, I'm still a drug addict. If I use drugs, it's like being an alcoholic. But every day it's better. Every day. Then gradually it leaves your head.
Peace. I am Philip Roundtree, and you are tuned into the January 10th edition of Rhetorically Speaking. Props to those of you who are tuned in on Facebook Live. Definitely props to those of you watching on YouTube Live. Make sure you hit that share button, right? Make sure you subscribe. As I always say, my daughter, well, she's not in private school anymore. So I'm still trying to monetize it. I ain't gonna lie, right? It might not go to paying her tuition, but it's going to go to, she's a teenager now and they be needing sneakers. They be needing all those beautiful things, right? What did she ask me for? She asked me for a Sims game, right? And I'm like, the same Sims game that I used to play 25 years ago, and I had to immediately shut her down because I know what I was doing in the Sims game, and we have some fathers here, so I'm sure we'll be able to have some conversations about that. So with that said, listen, this is one of those episodes that I needed. I'm gonna be frank. I'm gonna be honest with you. This is one of the episodes that have been on my spirit, right? I don't necessarily subscribe to a particular religion, but one thing that I do know is when the ancestors speak to me, I need to listen. And so this episode is about sobriety. This episode is about men in sobriety, and I wanted to have some gentlemen on, people who identify as men, to come in and have this conversation with me. Yes, I can have it by myself, and yes, there will be somebody can gain something from that conversation by listening to me talk about my journey. Listen to me talk about my brother's journey. January 6th, right? There's such irony, right? The 1 year of the terrorism that took place at the Capitol. That date also is super impactful for me because it's 21 years since my brother died from an overdose, right? And so this week in me navigating this journey has been interesting, right? On December 31st, actually, I celebrated 1 year sober. And I took a step back and I had to say, Phil, I'm proud of you. Right? I'm proud of you. Yes, other people were saying, oh, congratulations. I felt a bit shamed, even posted it on social media, because I know there are folk out there who for whatever reason, they haven't taken that step. And I didn't want it to feel like how I feel sometimes when I post on social media that, I might be bragging. But I had to be honest with myself. I had to be real with myself. I had to be vulnerable. I had to love on myself and say, Phil, I'm proud of you. And so with that being said, I want to introduce these gentlemen who came to have this conversation with me. It's gentlemen that I'm proud of. Right? Again, I can't have this conversation by myself. It will be unfair to you all because we all have our unique journey. We all have our unique circumstances and situations that we're forced to overcome at times, especially when it comes to things like sobriety, when it comes to addiction, no matter what the addiction is. I'll get into to my experience a little bit later, but I first want to introduce our guests. And so what you're seeing, hopefully in the bottom right-hand corner, it's either in the bottom right-hand corner or left. I'm not sure how this shows up on YouTube and Facebook, but we have the amazing Christopher Scott. aka the hip hop social worker. He is an educator, a therapist, a sneakerhead. He got more podcasts than Diddy got names. Right. Every time I see Chris is he's doing a different podcast, which is definitely a beautiful thing. He's also an Oregon Ducks and Portland Blazers fan. I had to throw that in. Right. That means he's experienced a lot of disappointment, a lot of hurt, a lot of pain in the last 5 or so years. Even when the Blazers were making it to the Western Conference Finals and getting swept. Chris felt that, but I'm sure he gleaned some positivity from it, right? So I want to thank you for coming through, Chris.
Man, I appreciate you. What's funny though? I mean, the Sixers, you know what I'm saying? Even though the process, I ain't never seen the process in any Eastern Conference final game, but it's all good. I ain't mad at them, you know what I'm saying? Trust it. We're gonna trust it.
Word. You know, we're not going to even talk about the guy Ben Simmons, man, right? Because it's at this point, I have no idea what's happening to him. I just hope he's okay, and that's sincere, right? That's sincere because when you can't do the thing that you love, right, that impacts you, right, psychologically, spiritually, mentally, and emotionally. You know, so I empathize with him, and hopefully in the left, right, on your left corner, we have Shimon, not Simon, not Shaman, but well, we have Shimon Cohen, who is the host and producer of the Doing the Work podcast. He's also an educator, race and social justice advocate, and he's also an Oregon Ducks fan. But that's we're not worried about that. He's a Celtics fan, right? And so when you have Sixers and Celtics fans come together, and I promise we're not going to be talking about sports, right? I feel bad for him. I feel sad, right, that he has two amazing players on his team, and they can't do anything. Right? They can't do anything. I see it on Twitter every day. Right? I want to offer them
We're up right now. We're up right now.
they're up right now. So that's all that matters. We got
5 minutes.
Exactly. We got to stay in the here and now. We got to be present. So, but I definitely appreciate you coming through, good bro.
Thanks, man. So glad to be here.
No doubt, no doubt. And last but certainly not least, we have one of my two white friends, right? That I have. and I always bring it. Shimon, you in the running. You definitely in the running, based off how this episode's go. But nah, he's one of those people who, he's a brother from another. He's somebody who I instantly connected with. You've heard him on You Good Man or Rhetorically Speaking. You've heard him speak truth to power about issues of race and social justice. He's also a social worker like the four of us. He's an abolitionist. And again, he's somebody that means a lot to me, right? He's somebody that means a lot to me. No, we don't talk all the time, but when we do connect, it's always love. It's always authentic. And it's something that we need, right? As men, we need to be vulnerable with one another. And so I want to thank Michael Olnick for coming through.
Always humbled to come out and participate, man.
No doubt. No, that's all you got for him today?
I mean, I don't have any podcasts or content. I'm just the guy that's got some experience with some stuff, and I'm here to talk about it.
Word. He's an educator, right? An educator in the Philadelphia
I'm an
school system.
in high school.
And so if he sounds a little tired, right? If he sounds a little fatigued, it's because of that. Philly School District has no idea what the hell they're doing. They're winging it like much of the country, right? They just winging it, as we were talking about off air, right? The pandemic is over, right? Even if there is a pandemic that's taking place, it's over, right? There will not be a shutdown. They're going to continue to rush kids back into school, right? There will continue to be super spreaders, and people not giving a damn. That's just where we are. And so I encourage everybody tuned into this to take care of yourselves, right? Because clearly we can't trust government, right? We can't trust government to take care of us or help us in this journey of wellness. So we got to take care of ourselves. And now since I've belabored that those introductions, I want to get straight to it. What you heard the amazing, the immaculate Miles Davis, a blues musician who talked about his addiction to heroin. He talked about how he quote unquote kicked this addiction, how he was sober. He talked about locking himself in a room at his dad's house for 5 days. and he went through withdrawals or what have you. I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to say whether he was telling the truth or not. I know when we talk about addiction, I know when we talk about sober living, uh, isolating yourself for 5 days, especially depending upon the level of addiction, depending upon the type of drug that you're using, it may seem far fetched, right? But I thought that was important to play because it highlights that this is an epidemic that's been consistent for centuries, right? This is something that transcends race. This is something that transcends gender. This is something that transcends socioeconomic status. And so, again, I wanted to have this conversation with four individuals who are at different points of their sobriety. And so, I want to start off with you, Mike. So, can you talk a little bit just about your journey through and this sober lifestyle and sober living?
Yeah, I mean, for me, beginning in like seventh grade, drugs became my personality. They were who I was, and it grew from there. And as I went through high school, I became the kid that used to bring a physician's desk reference with pictures so that I could help other kids identify prescription drugs that they had at their parents' house, right? I would get drunk before school, would get high during the day, and it just spun out and spun out and spun out until I became part of the familiar narrative where I went from using Oxycontin to using heroin, and things spun out quicker. And at 19, I found myself homeless, going from couch to couch with all my belongings in a trash bag. And somehow the opportunity to go to rehab lined up with me being just beaten down enough to say, okay. And the thing that solidified my problem with mind and mood altering substances was that for 5 days I kicked in a hospital. The day I got out, a friend of mine came to see me before I went to rehab. And he's like, they're not going to let you use in there, right? And I was like, yeah, man, it's rehab. You don't use drugs in rehab. He's like, here's a bag. And he gave me a bag of heroin. And as soon as I did it, I asked, let me get another one. And he refused, but I wanted more, right? And that was February 14th, 2006 that I went to rehab. So February 15th, 2006 was the first day of sobriety for me. Um, and it was the beginning of my life.
Well, first, congratulations. I recognize that it's a never-ending journey, right? But again, I applaud you. I appreciate you. I see you, right? In the effort, and just me knowing you the time that I've known you, right? I recognize how transparent you are with, and I think this is one of the reasons why we connect is because you are so transparent with your journey. It's like, hey, this is me. This is where I've been. This is, yes, I've experienced these trials and tribulations, but I'm here, right? This is a part of me. This will forever be a part of me. So I appreciate you in sharing that. I do have two questions. Now, was there an impetus for your initial usage? So we're talking about trauma or things alike that impacted you
Yeah.
to begin to use.
Yeah. And I couldn't see it at the time, right? At the time, it was just, I found this thing and it makes me feel whole. It quiets this inner knowing that sits at the center of my being that constantly just reminds me that it's there. And when I use whatever drug I happen to use, it goes away, right? This void that just always wants to remind me that it's there. And but if I'm pointing to trauma, I mean my household growing up was trauma, right? My parents were super unhealthy, super, I mean, there was drugs involved. Like my first conception of a relationship is the police showing up, arguments and things getting thrown at me and my brother hiding under a table. You know what I mean? So like that kind of stuff, and like how that contributed to a terrible sense of self, how that contributed to this overwhelming self-hatred to where I didn't feel comfortable as I am ever. And drugs became this, well, if I take this, I'll be comfortable no matter where I am. And that was like kind of the way that worked for me.
I'm gonna table my second question for later on. Shimon, can you talk a little bit about your journey?
Yeah. Um, I can actually remember the first time I ever got drunk was probably, I don't exactly remember what age I was, maybe like somewhere around 10, 11, 12. It was at a Passover Seder. And there's a lot of wine on Passover. And I guess they were letting us have wine. And I remember standing up and feeling really weird. And my first thought was, don't tell anyone about this. Like, and I think that's really interesting that that was my first thought, because like, where did that come from? But I remember having that thought, like, don't let the adults know that like this is how I feel right now. And then it just, as I like 13, drinking, but it wasn't like, it didn't, at that point it wasn't like crazy, but like the first time I drank like with my friends, like I totally passed, like I was a mess, like I was in complete oblivion. I think someone's parents were like out of town, and we just like all we had a plan, and then I smoked a lot of weed. So like I mainly drank and smoked a lot of weed, and then I got into like coke, and some other things, lots of like hallucinogenics too. But um in high school, like I think it was interesting, Michael, that you said it became your personality, because like I really connect with that. That's how I was, and at first it was like, oh, I'm only going to do this on the weekends. Like I think freshman year it was like, I'm only going to do this on the weekend. And then sophomore year it was like, I'm only going to do this after school. And then it was like, I'm just, before school, during school. Um, and I did well in school actually. So like I kind of got left alone in a sense because of that. But I was I was hanging out with an older crowd that was, there was stuff going on that I didn't even know was going on among that crowd, like have harder drugs. And because I would usually at a certain point pass out at a party and or whatever. But yeah, just lots of situations that were not good, that it's honestly a miracle that I survived. I have friends who didn't. When you spoke about your brother, I mean, my best friend, she and I, when like she was like a year older than me, so the first time I ever quit I was 19. So I mean that tells you something, right? Like at 19 I was already like, okay, like I have a problem, like I'm done, I need to be done. I think I quit smoking weed at one point, then smoked again, then quit drinking. It was always like one thing, then I would do more of the other. And so she and I quit together. And then like the one night she drank again, she was killed in a car accident. And that just wrecked me. Like I didn't even understand how wrecked I was. And I was sober, I guess, at the time. A group of our friends, she's like in the hospital, and a group of our friends get together to pray for her, which was also kind of weird because like I never really like prayed with my friends ever. So it was like, but whatever. And there everyone's like getting high and drinking and then getting in their cars and driving. And our friends in the hospital, she was actually basically dead, but we didn't fully understand it at the time because she was on life support, but
Yeah.
she wasn't coming back. And then, and then even after that, I drank again, and it just took me way deeper. I ended up in a lot of just bad situations, moved around a lot, just really bad relationships with, or no relationship with my family. And just, it took things getting really bad, I guess, like, we all have a play, like most of us who are sober, right? We have some sort of series of events that kind of happen. And mine weren't, it was weird because I had like physical events, like living situations, like experiences that if I went into detail, they would be worse than like the night, like that was my last night back in December 2003.
Mhm.
But I had an experience like I got pulled over and I had like when the cop was running my license, I just had this like crazy experience sitting in the car. Just this really, like, it was like my friend who had been killed all those years before. It was like she was like there with me. I know it sounds crazy, but like that's what happened. I'd be lying, I'd be making
Yeah.
it up if that didn't happen. And that was it. There was a guy, I was at my job. There was this guy who had like 13 years sober, and he didn't like advertise it or anything, but like I knew, because like people would go out and like drink or whatever, and he'd always be like drinking soda or whatever. And I thought he was real cool and like he really had it together and stuff. So like I think the next day I went to work, I'm like, bro, I'm done. Like I got to be done. And that was the start of my sobriety journey, and I'm really fortunate that I've been sober. I mean, this last December, I just celebrated 18 years, and I've lost a lot of friends along the way, people
Yeah.
who are sober, people who relapsed. I mean, it only takes one night or one day or whatever, one relapse, and
Yeah.
that could be it, So
Yeah.
I count my blessings, with that.
Word. And that was one of the reasons why I reached out to you. I want to say I'm new to Twitter. I've had an account for 10 years. But I've just got active in tweeting and retweeting and all of these things. And I ended up following you. My research advisor, he had spoke about you, showed me your podcast some point within the last year or so. Shout out to Steve. He just posted about the Warriors. Like, okay.
Wow.
Yeah. Because he knows I'm anti Warriors, anti super teams for sure. But you were one of the first people that I followed, and being intentional about my follows, right? Because I don't necessarily want to see everything from everybody. And so I've been following a lot of social workers, which we all happen to be. And I saw you tweet about being 18 years sober, right? And so for me, again, we talk about the confirmations from the ancestors, and I believe in the ancestors, right? I don't think anything happens by coincidence. So whether it's my brother, whether it's your friend who you talked about losing, I think that that all played a part in me reaching out to you, right? And why I felt compelled, because sometimes we can't explain why we feel some type of way, but it's just like, dang, I gotta do this, right? And so I appreciate you, I applaud you, so, and thank you for taking time out to come on here.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
No doubt. Chris, now I know, and I've been following your journey. I've been following you for a minute. I've done your podcast, right? One of the 12 that you that you got. It's always great content that you put out there. And so I saw within the last year or so that you've been open and honest and transparent about your journey, and as it pertains specifically to alcohol. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes. Man, August 1st, I decided to stop drinking. I ain't smoked either since then,
Oh,
but
salute.
yeah, but it was just, it was so. I have a a daughter, two daughters now, and I really didn't want to like, you know, be around them like under the influence, you know what I'm saying? So like I was like, I'll wait around till like 10 o'clock to pour a drink. I like to roll a blunt, you know what I'm saying? I was like, man, this is, you know, by the time I smoke and drink, I'm about to go to sleep, you know what I'm saying? So I was like, man, I wonder like what it would be like just to like not just do it, you know what I'm saying? Just to kind of relax, don't worry about it, you know, because, you know, fortunately, I've never had experiences where like, you know, I was in a bad predicament, you know, to where like, you know, something traumatic happened and I like, you know, hit super bottom. I've definitely had embarrassing moments, you know what I'm saying, being under the influence. But you know, I've been lucky. So I decided like, you know, while I have this luck under my belt, I might as well just try to do it, you know, cold turkey. And it really was just to see like how life would be without it.
Yeah.
I feel like I was wasting my time with it. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, when I was in college, because I grew up in a sober household, you know, my parents was on drugs for the first 6 years of my life. So like, so like we weren't around drugs and alcohol from like from the age I was like 5 to like, I was like, well, at 18, I started getting my own, you know what I'm saying? But I didn't really start drinking and smoking until I was like 18, you know? So like, and I was always a shy person. So I realized that, you know, when I was be places, be drunk, be really, be faded. I was like the life of the party. And that kind of made me feel like, you know, that was cool to like, you know, go somewhere. People like hanging out with you because you get drunk and you like,
Yeah.
you know, you crack jokes and you do funny shit, you know what I'm saying? So that was always kind of like, you know, my reason, to, get drunk, you know what I'm saying, you know, get high. But after a while though, like when I was in college, I could say that I was addicted to weed. You know what I'm saying? I would smoke whenever I could. I would leave class to smoke. I would stay home to smoke. I would smoke before I ate. I wouldn't eat unless I smoked. You know what I'm saying? So that was like that was a journey, and I remember having to kick that because I had an epiphany when I was about 10 years ago. I was trying to get a job after college. I was like, hold on, I'm gonna have to stop smoking. So I remember like, you know, cold turkey, I stopped smoking for 3 years, but then weed became legal in Oregon, right? So I remember getting a job with the state of Oregon, and they was like, oh yeah, you know, weed is legal, so you know, RUA, you know, we test for everything else, we just don't test for weed. So I was like, well, so like 2016, I started like smoking again, like real heavy, you know what I'm saying? Just really whenever I could. I mean, I kind of like going to dispensaries and like, you know, buying weed. I ain't gonna lie, you know what I'm saying? But do all that, you know what I'm saying? My kids, you know, and just really wanted to see what life was like without, drugs and alcohol. Like, you know, being a full-fledged adult, not really leaning on, getting twisted anytime I could. And I've done too much stuff, you know what I'm saying? I've partied the best ways I can party. I'm 36 years old, you know what I'm saying? I really don't need to be out here like that. I don't need to be out here chasing drinks and, you know, just being faded because I need to, you know, to unwind, you know what I'm saying? But what I will say is one thing that's interesting about myself that I realized that I don't get stressed and turn to a drink. What makes me turn to a drink is like being like around places that are like fun. So like, you know, so like football season, right? Man, I'm at my brother's house, you know, saying the Ducks is playing the Huskies. You know, if you know anything, man, that's a game so that's the game the Ducks gotta win. And they taking shots. And I'm like, oh man, they taking shots and they kicking it. They kicking it so hard. I'm like, I just want to kick it so hard, but I didn't drink. You know, Civil War is another one. Well, it ain't called Civil War no more, but you know what I'm saying? The U of O game versus OSU, Oregon State, that's another one when you go to the game and they really getting turned up. People, and it's like, you know, and I see people just, you know, having drinks and getting their issue. And I'm just
Yeah,
like,
I feel like you back there right now, like you just thinking about it, like yo, damn, that'd be fun, man. It'd be fun,
you
but
know,
you,
but I had to hold it down, and I don't know how long this journey is gonna go. I don't know if I'm gonna quit forever. I know my parents is really like, they have good influence over me of like, you know, not doing it again. You know what I'm saying? But I feel like I feel like it needs to be long term. It needs to be more than, you know. Right now I'm at 160. I'm at about 160 days. I feel like it needs to be a long term thing.
word, Well, salute to you for for the time that you have in. Again, these varying time frames, right? They're indicative of just the resilience of us all, and I think we need to celebrate ourselves. Just they say take it day by day, right? Moment by moment, because that's so critical, right? I know for me, this one year, similar to Chris, college was when I became an alcoholic, right? I think it's lessened since then, but hey, I'm 17. On campus with my friends. We all trying to put together $7 for a bottle of Nikolai Volkov, right? Right, and we're buying this bottle of vodka that tastes disgusting because we want to have fun, we want to party. And I saw the toll that it took on some of my peers, right? Some of them flunked out as a result. And so I kept that going. And not to say that I drank every day, definitely probably drank weekly in college, but it was something that helped me, somebody dealing with depression and anxiety, somebody who had low self-esteem, somebody who continues to have low self-esteem, right? So even when I say celebrate myself, that still doesn't feel too, I'm really talking to y'all. I'm not necessarily talking to myself about celebrating myself, if I'm being honest, because this is a journey of that I'm going to be dealing with for the rest of my life when we talk about this self-esteem piece. And so it was the fun that came out, right? I'm more loud and boisterous. I feel like I'm funnier. I felt like I'm funnier when I'm under the influence. I remember vividly from one of my homies' 21st birthday, and it was no 19th birthday, and it would take 19 shots, right? And he got the like 12 or 13 of 99 apples, and he was sprawled out, and we had it all on video, right? I ended up getting arrested by cops. We all got arrested by cops for underage drinking at the university that I went to, and that wasn't enough. That wasn't enough for change to take place, right? Because it's just like, hey, that's an outlier. It's not, hey, look at this behavior. It's, hey, I got to be better at masking this. Hey, maybe getting drunk on the first floor and having a party and having all this traffic come through your room, maybe that's not the best thing to do, right? Maybe we need to take it to somebody else's room. And again, we talk about youth. We talk about immaturity. We talk about the knowledge that I had then versus now. And so for me, alcohol has always been an interesting relationship just because it is something that's extremely prevalent in my family. My uncle Sonny, God bless the dead, he was an alcoholic, right? And I literally watched him die. He came to live with us. My brother and I, we went out to go play basketball. We came back and he was deceased. Right. And I'm taking that with me. We take these traumatic experiences with us. I talk about my brother. I see all the rappers, right? Specifically, they talk about lean, they talk about purple drank, they talk about promethazine or what have you. For him, that was something that he engaged in, something he indulged in. I have no idea why, right? I'll never have the answer as to why, but I recognize that, people say, "Oh, I'm sorry for your loss," and for me, I say that was his journey, right? And his journey ended abruptly. Hopefully, I can learn from that. And so, me learning from that was, no, I'm not going to do no codeine. I'm not going to pop no pills. But it's not recognizing the role that alcohol is playing in my life. It wasn't until a few years ago and I started my business. Those of you know who quantify, I have the men's group. I go around to colleges and universities to speak. The week before I was to go to Westchester University here in Pennsylvania to speak, I crashed my car, right? I crashed my car. It flipped over. And so I was at the bar with a now ex-girlfriend of mine. We got drunk, right? Because with me, it's either all or nothing. I don't see a point in having one drink. We either gonna go in or I'm not showing up or I'm not drinking. I'm just gonna have water. And so for me, recognizing that, hey, that is a part of the addiction. That is a part of alcohol use, alcohol abuse disorder, right? And recognize where I'm at with it. And I ended up crashing my car. It ended up flipping over. I just remember getting out and people like was trying to stop me from walking away, right? Because I didn't hit some cars on a one-way street, and so they wanted to sit me there. I'm like, I'm going to my friend's house. I'm going to my friend's house, and because I had another friend whose block I was on, and I was just going to go to her house, and the ambulance came, right? The ambulance came, and I got in. And again, we talk about the ancestors. God bless the dead. Kenny Green. He was a firefighter for many years here in the city. He died in the fire station, and everybody knew who he was because he was the lead of different organizations. And so when the fire department came, the ambulance came, and I got in, I was like, oh man, it's like, how this happened? I was like, Kenny Green would be so disappointed in me, being manipulative, right? And because I was literally like a half a block away from where he used to live too. They knew who he was, so they're like, oh, get him a breath mint, get him a breath mint. They was like, you want to go to the hospital? I was like, nah. They was like, okay, you got to tell the doctor on the phone. We're gonna call him up so we could get you out of here, right? And so called the doctor, like, nah, I don't need to go to the hospital. As soon as I'm about to get off get out the ambulance, the police showed up, right? And so the police showed up. I'm like, oh, this is it. And so again, I don't know what forces were in play. The police officer said, hey, license and registration. I was like, I don't know if I have it on me. It might be in the car. He was like, I was like, you know what? It's, my mom, she has it in her name right now. And so he was like, well, what's your mom's number? I said, man, it's new. It's a new number. I don't remember it. Right? Mind you, I'm out of my mind, blitzed, right? And he said, oh, okay, left off, came back, gave me a ticket. He said, go, this is your DC number. Wasn't arrested, right? The only thing that happened was the car being towed. And so for me, that could have been a travesty, right? Me being a social worker, me in the decision making. I had to go that next week and talk to young black and brown men about healthy decision making. I had this whole speech written out, and I was going to do my thing like I always do my thing, and I scrapped it. Started crying, right? Because it was the lack of authenticity that was up there right now, right? And so my therapist, she says, Phil, listen, intellectually you have it, cognitively you understand it, but you don't feel it. What's not aligning? There's something not aligning. You can go here and do these great, amazing things. You could do a TED Talk. You could do all these great things, but it's something with you where you're not believing, right? And so for me, that started the impetus of change where the seed was planted. I'm not going to say I stopped drinking then, but it was like no more drinking and driving, right? Until we got up to this last December where it was, hey, we got drunk, my partner and I, December 30th got drunk, December 31st, it was just like, I don't like feeling this way. And I'm sure you all can relate to that. Damn, I don't like feeling this. I'm Chris Eddy 36, right? I'm 38. I feel old, right? I got these grays that come in. I'm a father. But more importantly, I want what I'm saying. I want things to be aligned, right? I don't want to be this person out in the world where I'm speaking or whether I'm teaching, but to myself, I'm not adhering to what it is that I'm saying. And so similar to Chris, is not to say that I'll never drink again. But when I sit and think about, hey, you know what, I'm going to have a drink, it's just like, for what? And I start playing in my mind everything that comes with that, right? First, $35 for a bottle of Crown, right? Nah, I ain't got the 35, right? I ain't got the 35. Then I think about, okay, I'm a drink. What happens? I fall asleep. I wake up. I'm sore. I'm cranky. I'm even in a more depressed mood than when I started, right? And so for me, it was that idea of, first, I deserve better. And I think that's what I'm saying to myself. And it's similar, Chris. My mom, she's probably listening, watching this. Shout out to Rachel Roundtree. She's an advocate of me not drinking again. Right. And maybe we can talk about this, right? Where it is a fear for me to say, I will never drink again because I recognize I'm human and that I'm fallible. And I feel like if I do drink, I'm going to, and I think all social workers are extremely critical of themselves, right? But I feel like I'm going to be even more critical if I do quote unquote relapse. And so can anybody speak to that? Does anybody else have that type of what word do I put to it? Do I put guilt? Do I put just that type of thinking when it comes to um, using in any type of capacity?
I do.
Go ahead.
Even though this is like, new space, but for me, but you said something that kind of I can relate to about, kind of being blitzed, but then going and speaking to young men about, healthy relationships, you know what I'm saying? And I used to justify like me going out and getting faded because like, I work with youth that I don't want them to do that, even as a therapist, like, if there's someone who struggles with drugs and alcohol and I'm trying to help them through that, what I'm saying? I used to like practice like, okay, so what would I say if they asked me about that? You know what I'm saying? And I used to justify my use like, well, I'm not the one sitting here, looking for assistance. And that just sounds twisted to me, you know what I'm saying? Even like thinking back to it, but that's what, because I used to think that nobody's gonna impede on when I want to have a good time, you know what I'm saying? But anyway, but you said that and it kind of, made me feel those thoughts. But anyway, just speaking about I'm definitely scared to to put the forever label on it, you know what I'm saying? Because let's say you know, so let's say I do want to go out and have a drink, you know what I'm saying? Are people going to judge me? You know what I'm saying? Am I a failure now? Because, what I'm saying, because, I made decisions to go out and drink again, you know what I'm saying? Like what are people going to say? So I feel like, from that sense, it's pressure, because I don't want to be like, the talk of, people's circles or, are people looking like, oh, well, that didn't last that long, you know what I'm saying? So I feel like it's just hard to put the forever on it because, yeah, I just don't want to, I don't want to be looked at as a failure or somebody who couldn't handle their stuff or, a pity party, you know what I'm saying? I don't want people to feel sorry for me because I'm drinking again. So, yeah, it's just, I have a whole lot of thoughts about that. So I feel like to avoid those thoughts, it's just easier not to drink and smoke. You know what I'm saying? It's just easier, just don't do it. I won't have to worry about backlash. I won't have to worry about, what I'm saying, explaining myself. Practice what I preach. I'll, I'll find something else, to do, so.
Yeah. Word. Thank you. Mike or Shimon, can you speak to that? Seeing as though you both have, almost decades into your sobriety, can you speak to what Chris and I are feeling about this idea of what if I what if I mess up, right? This fear that's attached to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think so for me, like my story is a little bit different from you and Chris because you guys kind of just made the decision of yourselves to be like, yeah, it's time to put the drink down. Where I went through the whole go to rehab, go to a 12-step program. And I think what's really hammered in 12-step programs and in rehabs is to not even identify with the idea of forever. Like when I first got clean, I identified with I'm not going to use for the next 5 minutes and then I'm going to reassess. Uh, like forever
Okay.
can be as long as I want it to be.
Yeah.
Forever can be the next 10 minutes. But I understand the weight of that, right? Like, listen, I got clean at 19. I never had a legal drink. I never went into a bar,
Oh
sat
wow.
down, and ordered a drink, right? So this idea of getting clean and like letting that go definitely felt like this thing I was committing to. But at this point, 16 years in almost, I don't even think about it to be honest.
Wow.
Like it's not like it's a part of who I am, but it's not actively on my mind. And I think this idea of guilt, especially in social circles, if you were to, it's been exacerbated by social media. Like I've watched that happen as I've stayed clean over the last 16 years and social media becomes more involved because people are more vocal about their sobriety and they like post about it. And then there's this whole, well, how come they stopped? Or how come they, and the thing is I don't think sobriety has to be forever. I think it comes down to your relationship to the activity you're engaging in. If there's like authenticity in that relationship, if it's promoting something in your life, you have every right to participate. But if you've gotten to a point where you've decided there is no authenticity, I am being held captive by this behavior, and I want to lay low for a little bit, you get to lay low for a little bit. Forever is a hell of a commitment, man. It's,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's tough for anybody. I just try to look at it as like, right now in my life, a substance isn't appealing to me. Just isn't. I want to try to authentically relate to myself and my position in the world. Because for me, substances were about dressing up my position to the world so that I could feel authentic, but I actually wasn't.
That's a interesting way that you phrase it. What are your thoughts, Shimon?
Yeah, I appreciate this conversation. um, I don't think about forever. Um, at a certain point, I passed over like the number of years I drank and I used, and I have like more time sober than that time. I remember that being like a surreal moment. But I so this is like, I'm trying to come up with the right words for this, but my whole life is about being sober and really about recovery. So like I do things every day for that. So that's like the part, like I am actively doing things every day, and I've done them for 18 years. um and I enjoy them. You know what I mean? So like
Yeah.
I don't have, I mean, my wife has like there's like wine in the house. Like when in the beginning for me, I couldn't have anything. Like I mean, I was also single back then and didn't have a family, and I just needed to not have anything like in the house, or in the apartment or wherever I was at the time. But like my wife, she doesn't have a problem with drug, she's like she doesn't have a problem. Like I have a problem. She does
Yeah.
not have a problem.
Yeah.
She'll sit and drink a glass of wine. We could go to dinner and she will drink one glass of wine, and this is where my stuff comes out, because I'll look at her glass of wine and I'll think, how has that been? That's it? Like, or you're not even going to drink the whole, like that part of me is still like, because for me, that could not happen. Like that could not happen. Once it starts, like it's like you're saying, it's on, it's on. So I just, I mean, I know people who have had a lot of time and relapsed, and I've heard the pain of it. Number one, some of them are not around anymore because that was it for
Yeah.
them. Um, so that scared me. Like that scared me, early on when I heard those stories. Like that scared the shit out of me. And then it's like, I don't know. I don't want that. I just, if I there's been times where I've gotten cravings or urge. It's not so much a physical craving. I've definitely had like mental cravings at certain times. Like when I've gotten like really stressed out. Um, it's usually something pretty serious going on. And I just, I have people I can call. I have things I can do to help to get through those moments. One thing that I've learned is like I can get through conflict without having to change the way I feel using like drugs or alcohol, which that was not possible for me. Like when I was a teenager, like that was not an option for me. Like I didn't know how to do that. I had no coping strategies. Like my coping strategy was to get high or get drunk, and that actually got me through a lot of stuff. So I don't know what would have happened, given what was going on if I didn't do that. I don't
Yeah.
know. But I I have tools now, you know, and I've had them for a while. I can feel when I got sober, I was like, wow, like I have anxiety. Like I didn't know like I had anxiety. No one talked about anxiety when I was a teenager. You know, it was like and then also I'm like in all these like my bachelor's my degree, I graduated from my bachelor's family and human services, right? So I'm in all these classes, I'm learning about all this stuff and I'm like applying it all to myself, right? Like I don't know if you guys had that experience in school. And and then I like slowly started like learning like coping skills, you know, like my wife and I remember like the first time we got in an argument, it was like, oh wait, like we can have an argument and then we can be okay. Like that was never, I never had that before. Like the relationship was over. Like it was not. So like these are all just these things I've, and I'm a very like I tend to be kind of rigid. It's like it's like I get very like rigid thinking. And so that's been something I've had to really challenge. And I think it goes with this like recovery process for me of like just like not, there's no perfection here, like there's nothing perfect, I'm not perfect, like you know, and just keep just keep going, like just keep, every day is like a new day to
Yeah.
like do this again, you know.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I think about it. But yeah, if I think about it and I think about like if I relapse, like I'm sure I'd feel horrible. um it just doesn't feel like an option for me right now. It just doesn't feel like an option for me. I hope it never feels like an option, but I can honestly say it just doesn't feel like one.
Word.
You know, I have so much to lose. That's the crazy thing too. You know, when I started this journey, like I had a lot less to lose, if that makes sense. Like, I mean, I had me, but I didn't have a wife. I didn't have two amazing daughters, you know, like I didn't have a relationship with my parents, which I have all of that now. I've gotten like all of these gifts in my life because of this, you know, so I don't want to give all that up.
Or I appreciate you. I think you brought up, some critical, some three critical things. And maybe it's just the therapist in me, right? I heard you talk about just the coping skills, right? Finding the coping skills to deal with whatever emotions that you're experiencing, right? And how critical that is to this journey that you've undertaken. The second one was what was the second one? This is why we write things down. The second one was this idea of everything that you do is geared towards your sobriety, or the majority of the things that you do is geared towards your sobriety. And so I think about that, right? And I think about it in terms for myself, and it resonated where uh, this self-esteem piece, because a lot of my drinking was related to that, right? Being in these spaces, the anxiety, right? The social anxiety that that came with that. And so I think about the different things, again, things my therapist say, right? She's like, Phil, you podcast, you do X, Y, and Z. Why? Because you enjoy it. You feel good about it. And I think about the things that I do in my life that makes me feel good, right? The same thing that the alcohol would make me feel good for that moment in time, right? So the podcast, being in school, just learning in general, like these things edify, me and make me feel good. And so it's important that we find things that helps us. I don't want to say replace, right? Okay, reconnection successful. All right, so we are back. Sorry, we had a brief little glitch right there. But I do want to shout out those who are in the chat. Again, shout out my research advisor, Steve, who's tuned in, has some positive things to say. Jace Hodge, I have 10 years, one day at a time. Salute to you, family. Equity Matters podcast, 43 days for me. Salute to you. Slickstar Rick, right? And you're not just going to give us one Slick Star, Rick. You're going to give us two of them, right? I just quit drinking 2 months ago myself. Salute to you. Slick Star Rick brings up this idea of willpower, right? And maybe that's where I was going when it came to Miles Davis, right? Because what I hear him saying, he's locked himself in a room for 5 days and he's just going to will himself to sobriety, especially from heroin. First, I don't really, I'm, yes, I have some knowledge of drug and alcohol and recovery. And maybe Mike, you can speak to that, right? This idea of locking yourself in a room for 5 days. Does that speak to this idea of just having willpower, or are there external things that are needed and to help one along this journey?
Yeah, I think what that is that we like the willpower story. It's heroic, it's exciting, it's dramatic. Uh, my experience is white knuckling it. That's how I watched a lot of people die. It's how I watched a lot of people not get this. It's how I buried a lot of friends. Um, I don't believe that you can really attach to a change that's as big as sobriety without also having community. If you don't have it anchored in community, you don't have the support to deal. Like, if willpower worked, then the time that I was committed to a crisis center on the same day my house was raided by the media police department, and the psychiatrist was asking me if I had a drug problem, I would have said, yep, I had a drug problem. Or the time I was laid up in a hospital bed and the doctor has a tox screening, knows what was in my system, is telling me I have a heart problem. And I'm like, and they're like, do you want to go to rehab? I would have went to rehab, but I needed the community. I needed people. Willpower only works for so long, just like in anything. You don't get through anything in life on your own. That's my belief.
And that was the third thing. Remember, I got this short term memory. That's why I say you complete me, Mike. Right. That was the third thing. Is Shimon talking about community and support, which you also elaborated on. Go ahead, Shimon.
You complete me. I love it. No, I mean, this willpower thing, yeah, what Michael was saying is so right on. So out of these 18 years, my first 2 years were willpower, and I was miserable. I was a mess. I was sober and I was totally nuts. Like, totally nuts. I had no coping skills. Like, so you take what someone's used for all those years to deal with everything, every problem, and now they're all gone. And I was, I was doing, like, I used to train Muay Thai, kickboxing. So, like, that was great. Like, I would just go and train, like, work out a lot of issues doing that. But I got to the point where I felt like I was running out of time. Like, I literally, like, I felt it. Like, I felt like my days were numbered. And because that's what had happened before. But it was like I was I was tense. I was it was white knuckling it. I was just like, it was like 2 years. It was not, I don't recommend it. I don't recommend it. And then I had met people who had community and didn't push anything on me, because I had definitely some preconceived ideas of, like, getting help and things like that. And then I finally was like, you know what? Like, I can't do this on my own. I can't do it on my own. Like, I'm losing it. And I got connected to other people, and that's what totally saved me. And I've been part of community with others for, you know, I can't even imagine. I don't think I would have made it. I know I wouldn't have made it because I didn't make it before. So
Yeah.
I had to learn that it's I don't know, it's hard to explain. It's not about willpower. I have this issue with sweets where I haven't given them up. And I don't know how it is for you guys with other stuff, but, like, the willpower, it just willpower to me feels like I'm resisting something that I want. And I need to get to healing the wanting part, not the resisting wanting it. You know, I don't want drugs or alcohol anymore, and I haven't for a long time. You know, now of course there's that part in the beginning where you might it can be rough getting through 5 minutes, a minute, 5 minutes, an hour, a day, a week, you know, like sometimes that can, I mean, that felt rough to me, really rough. You know, but it hasn't, I don't, I mean, I mean, I'm being totally honest, like it just doesn't feel rough to me. What feels rough to me is seeing people go through hell, you know, using and drinking and all the drama and all. I mean, I just like, I don't want any of it. Like, I just don't want the drama. You end up saying stuff you wish you didn't. It's just, there's so much, you know. I don't miss any of that. I just don't miss any of that.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I think about, you know, the times, you know, especially in before we became so before we began unlearning a lot of the, and you know, I hate the term toxic masculinity. Before we started unlearning different things, right? I have friends of mine who would just uh, tongue kiss women in a club, right? Like, hey, let's kiss, and just start kissing. It's just only because they were intoxicated, right? And we would sit and we would laugh at it, but there was so much wrong with that. But you know, given the unhealthy tenets of masculinity that so many of us subscribe to, coupled that with alcohol, we see what the outcomes are, right? We see what the outcomes are. We have two questions in the chat. We have one from Steve Larton. I'm gonna direct this to you, hip hop social worker. You gotta put your therapist hat on. I don't think the Blazers playing right now, so you can think clearly. Uh, he says, I'm thinking about things from this conversation that aren't directly related to drugs and alcohol, but spending, fast food consumption, that all or nothing aspect is enlightening. Am I addicted to spending? Do I cope with things with just buying things? And so maybe that's not necessarily a question, but he was just speaking aloud as and contemplating this conversation aloud in the chat. But would you agree with him that this transcends drugs and alcohol?
Yeah, for sure. So a few years ago, Shimon, brings up sweets, right? So, a few years ago, when I first started doing therapy, I got laid off of a job, and I found myself stress eating, being like addicted to like fast food, not just food, but like fast food. Like I had to eat like KFC, I had to eat McDonald's, I had to eat. I was just out and about, and I was just, so I feel like you you have to be careful because you cut off one thing, I feel like that leaves room for something else. You know what I'm saying? And some people are addicted to spending money. You know what I'm saying? Like if you heard about somebody having a manic episode, I used to have, there was people that I knew who spend $10,000 in a day. You know what I'm saying? Just having that, that need to, spend. So yeah, so I feel like it does kind of transcend in other areas. So and when that happens, that's like you really have to be honest with yourself. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel like telling yourself you have an issue really helps with like exposing other issues in other areas, right? You know what I'm saying? So like when I was able to kind of sit down and think that I was addicted to weed, I knew that my weed addiction looked like my food addiction. I knew that my weed addiction looked like my alcoholism. I knew it looked like me spending money. I knew it looked like, whatever kind of barrier is on in your life, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, I feel like it just in those moments you just gotta kind of be honest, and I feel like a lot of this is like us. Well, for me, I always told myself that I deserved, to to get drunk. I deserve to go out and have, 3, Whopper meals in a day. I deserve to, spend $600 in a week on some shoes because I had a hard week. You know what I'm saying? So really just kind of scaling it back and seeing like, so why do you tell yourself these things? You know what I'm saying? Like, do you really need these things, or are these things just something that, like you're trying to fill a void, And that's the cool thing about addiction is that, man, like it can really come in all shapes and sizes, all forms, right? So and the Blazers do play tonight, so
Word,
but
word. No, I think you bring
Yo,
up a good
and
point and something. I'm sorry, Mike. I did just wanted to speak to we're such a reward ourselves society, reward ourselves culture, right? It's like you do something well, you need a reward. And there's theory behind it that everything is about reward, right? Whether it's a smile, whether it's a feel good, but there's something about that extrinsic reward, right? So whether it's going to buy myself some sneakers, I put that on my vision board, like, all right, I'm gonna buy me some sneakers if I went on the sneakers app. But it's always related to something outside, and if you're attaching that to alcohol, if you're attaching that to food, if you're attaching that to spending money, then it can become problematic, right? And so how can we find ways to make ourselves feel good, right, and validated without the extrinsic component? Go ahead, Mike.
yeah, and I was just going to hit on the fact, because this question kind of sparked in me in the idea that the why is addiction so problematic in this country, right? And it's that we have a consume based culture. Don't feel, don't deal with it, go consume, go gamble, go buy a bunch of food, go eat until you feel sick. Like, like, look at what happened. This is going to seem like a random reference, but like after 9/11, right? George Bush literally made a speech saying, get back to the shopping malls. That was like the signification that things were okay, right? So we're taught not to be still. We're taught not to feel because feeling is a problem for the system. A bunch of feeling humans building community with each other doesn't fit with this go, go, go culture, grind it out, grind it out, grind it out, grind it out. And I think that a lot of us can't handle the stillness. We can't handle that moment where you're sitting at home and you feel it. You know what it is because you've known it your entire life and it's still there. But instead of getting to know it, we go, what can I do instead? And I think a lot of addiction and a lot of void filling stuff is about getting to know whatever that feeling is, because everybody's got one. It looks different, it feels different, but there's
Yeah.
something in you that just says, I don't want to feel this, but you have to.
Yeah.
That's the only way you're going to heal.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Again, my therapist talked about, I need to, I can intellectualize it, but I got to feel my way through it, right? And that's not finding something to replace it. It's when that discomfort comes, right? Sometimes you have to just sit with it, right? You just have to sit with it and have that level of compassion and just awareness that it will pass, right? But that's some hard ass shit to do, right? And that's why when we ask people, especially how cliche it's become on social media, I try to to differentiate between social media and real life, right? And people have good intentions, but when I see shit about healing and it's just like, yo, do you know what you're asking people to do? You're asking somebody who for 40 years, for 50 years, for 20 years, for 15 years have been living life one way. And you're saying, hey, there needs to be an abrupt change and you got to feel all of that, right? How difficult that is, right? It's so much easier to make a post about quote unquote healing. And again, we talk about it like it's just some linear thing that happens, right? And it's like it's a destination, right? Like you're going to Cabo, right? You're going you're going to heal, right? Once you get there, you're going to be amazing. And that it's not this journey. But yeah, feeling it is so important and so critical. I want you, Shimon, to answer this question. from Aretha. She says, "Hi guys, it's authentically me from Twitter. Good vibes. Props to you." Props to you, authentically me. Hopefully, you hit that subscribe button. Hopefully, everybody hit that subscribe button because this is the type of content I bring on. I'm not gonna say a daily basis, right? But when I feel it energetically, I bring it to y'all. um, so Aretha says, oftentimes people feel guilty about drinking in front of people who are in recovery. How would you advise those people who are not in recovery and feel they should not have to not enjoy a drink? And so I think you brought that up when you were talking about your wife who, listen, I would be upset. You better than me. You gonna drink all that wine, right? That's about $12 glass right there. You know, so but if you can speak to that.
Sure. Hey, authentically me. Thanks for jumping on and retweet and sharing it too, so other people could see.
For sure.
Uh, um, I mean, I don't know where I'm at with it now. Is probably different than where I was at with before, but earlier on. But like, I think it's nice to have a conversation. You know, like it. I mean, I think it depends on your relationship with a person and the setting. But like, if people are coming over to like the house, like, and they show up with like a 30 pack or something, it's like, you know, maybe like, you know, I'm sober, right? You know, like, um, stuff like that. You know, or I mean, I feel like people are pretty cool about it that know me, that are like, oh, you know, like we're gonna be doing this, like you cool with that, you know, or we're gonna go. So I appreciate the conversation. I especially early on, like I like to know what I was gonna get myself into, you know, if I was gonna go and meet up with people or go over somewhere or go to something, what's that gonna be like, you know? Like I kind of had a thing where it was like, if I'm gonna go to something where I know there's gonna be alcohol, then if I at the soonest moment that I start feeling like uncomfortable about that, because I might be uncomfortable about other things. Because I am a little like, you know, anxiety with people and stuff like that, crowds. But then I'm gonna leave, you know, like I would just be like, I'm just gonna leave, you know, like I don't need to be here. I need to have, I always needed to have like an exit strategy, you know, like I needed to know don't want to be relying on getting somewhere based on other people and then I can't get out of that situation. Like that's always been something I've had to think about. So I think it's nice. Like I think it's a nice thing to ask and to take into consideration, you know, and to just, if someone I guess says, you know, hey, I'm not comfortable around it, then I guess then people have some decisions to make.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's like, do you want to hang out with the person or you want to have your, you know, do it the other stuff you're doing? So those are my thoughts about it.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, that type of change, right, where we're talking about surrounding ourselves with you know, with community, people who understand, people who get it. And sometimes people in our tribe who still engage, still indulge, we have to be extremely strategic about how we maneuver um those type of around those type of relationships, right? Like I got friends, you know, best friends, people who I love, right, from high school, and I know, you know, when we get together, it's been a drinking fest, right? One of my homies, he's a DJ, he's DJing somewhere like every other night, right? And I think about, okay, me going into this venue, right? Can I handle this? How am I going to respond if somebody offers me a drink? And the last time I went out, and this was like when we thought the pandemic was like chill, right? Even though you know it was never chill. I went out and I went into this space, and it really was my first time going out in some years, right? And it was just like, wait, is this how I used to act when I was drinking? Like, oh no, y'all getting on my nerves. Like you immediately become like triggered and you become hypersensitive. And I don't want to be the Christian, right? That new Christian who, you know, because I found Jesus, because I found Allah, because I found Buddha, now I'm judging, right? But it's just like, hey, you know what? Yeah, this might not be necessarily be an environment that I need to be in. and I can hang out with y'all depending upon, where what the environment is, right? But there's certain spaces that I can't come to. And I felt for me that was a big part. Let me see what the chat is saying. Oh, okay. So that was a response to your question, Aretha. Feel free to go back to listen in depth. Listen, I don't want to keep y'all too long because I feel like this is a conversation that can continue. I don't care about
I
George
got a
Allen.
question for you guys
Go ahead.
if it's cool.
Go ahead.
So this is something I've thought about a lot since becoming a social worker is I don't think about it as much anymore, but I went through a period where I really thought about this a lot. Is like, would there have been any intervention that could have reached me, when I was a teenager and I was like in my full on, or just when I was doing my thing, like could any intervention have worked, because like I got forced to go to counseling. They did that. I never got sent to a rehab or anything, but people tried to talk to me kind of, I guess. But I've thought about it like a lot, and I don't know. My answer is I don't know. If anything, I don't know if this is just like the path I was gonna take,
Yeah. Yeah. That's
But then
interesting.
I think about like young people I've worked with, and then I'm like, but I think sometimes we can do things to help, right? So it's like, so what, then it couldn't have helped me? Like, what could have helped me?
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting.
Do you guys ever think about that with like applying your social work stuff to yourself with,
It's,
or your younger self or whatever?
I never thought about that.
it's interesting.
Really, because I started like it's like I started drinking later in my teenage years. You know what I'm saying? But maybe, maybe if I had the right kind of mentor, because I've had mentors. I'm not going to say like I didn't have mentors. I was in a full-fledged program when I was in high school. That kind of connected us with coordinators and activities and stuff like that. But I always felt like I was like on the outside looking in. You know what I'm saying? So like maybe if I felt like I was connected to someone, you know what I'm saying, and like somebody who really understood what I was kind of go through, maybe I wouldn't like been so gung ho on like being the drunk person at the party that's having fun. You know what I'm saying? So like I do feel like maybe some interventions, I don't know if it would have saved me from like, going cold turkey, but maybe not seeing myself as such a low person, and then that lowness wouldn't have transcended into me having to show up with the half gallon of Potter's vodka and going balls to the wall. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Right.
I just maybe if there was like some other like black dude that was kind of quirky, kind of shy. You know what I'm saying? But then again, was I willing to listen? So like so that question is interesting. You know what I'm saying? But I do feel like you know maybe I just wasn't at the time. Maybe I wasn't you know ready to hear some things, and so yeah, I spent a lot of my teenage years trying to be invisible. You know what I'm saying? So if there was someone that could have connected with me to like make me want to be seen, then I think yeah, I probably would have you know looked at myself in higher regard for sure.
Yeah. I mean, in thinking about it, so, I talked about, some of the work that I do, like speaking and things like that, talking about like black mental health or what have you. And I look at myself as a seed planter, right? And that seed might bloom right then and there for some. And for some, it might be another 30, 40 years. For some, it might not happen at all. Right. And so for me, I think about the seed planters that I might have had. I know when I went to this university here in Pennsylvania, I had a gentleman, an ancestor now, Dr. Campbell and Kamara, God bless the dead. He was a seed planter, right? He in our brief interaction, he let me know that I had value, right? And so it wouldn't be until some years later that I was able to see what he saw to a certain extent, right? So when I think about, probably not, probably would have still, did some of the same knucklehead stuff like Chris was talking about. I still, would have been taking 6 shots of 151, throwing up, and then taking 5 more, right? Just because that was the environment that I was in. Um, but I do think if I had more knowledge of self, more knowledge of ancestry, of lineage, something bigger than me, and not necessarily religion or what have you. But I can speak to that though, right? Because I can speak to, because there was a period where I was a believer. I fashioned myself a Christian for a period of time, and that was the best I felt, right? And that's not necessarily about social work skill sets, but it was just like I saw I had value. I felt like I had value, right? And so I still think I would have went made the same choices. Might have been felt a little bit more convicted. Might have been a little harsher on myself. Might have cleaned, quote unquote, my act up a little bit sooner. But I don't know, right? But that's why I think for me personally, I do the work that I do. Because then if I am talking to an 8-year old, I didn't have that at 8, right? To let me know the value that I had. And so I don't know what that means for them at 16. Like I hate today's hip hop. I hate today's rap. But I think about somebody like Triple X Tentacion who had the language of depression, of anxiety at 19, 20 years of age. I didn't have it. And I was a I was a college student, getting a degree. Right? But I didn't have that language to use. So I'm hoping that by being a seed planter that it may blossom. What about you, Mike? It's an interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. When I think about myself, there was no intervention that would have worked when I was already on the path, right? Nothing was changing my trajectory once I hit high school. It was locked in. I like Shimon, like I was charismatic in high school. I know how to speak to people. I know how to move. I got good enough grades that no one had a clue about my struggles. Uh, and I think like if you're already in the spot, there's nothing. Your path's gonna be your path because I truly believe that only the individual can decide when their bottom is. There's nobody that's going to be like, this is your bottom. And you're going to be like, it sure is. No, you're going to be like, I've got more research to do. But I always think of prevention, prevention, prevention. Like if somebody had gotten between 8 and 10-year-old Michael and 13-year-old Michael, and like Phil was talking about, introduced him to what self-worth was, what value was, that he's worthy of love, that he's worthy of care, so that his inner narratives change. There's a chance. Um, and I think that's kind of been our message when we talk about community, is that there is like we need to be able to communicate that the narrative you feel within yourself isn't the only narrative available to you. There's lots of narratives out there. Um, I just since Shimon hit us with a question, this is just funny as I talked about this in therapy tonight. Like I'm seriously considering microdosing psilocybin as a way of treating like my depression, my anxiety, and my suicidal ideation that I've been dealing with all year, right? And as someone in recovery, it feels very slippery slope. Um, but like I like the outcomes that I see in the research there more than I like the outcomes in an SSRI that's like troubleshooting. Might work, might make you more miserable. So I've been like, there's always, when you're in sobriety, there's always moments where you're like, how is my path changing? And the one thing I wanted to say tonight is that sobriety isn't the same path always. It moves, it changes, it becomes different. Um, and it's something that's very individual. Um, yeah.
Real quick, can you let the people know what psilocybin is?
Oh, magic mushrooms. There's lots of really good research coming out on mushrooms, on MDMA, on LSD, on ketamine. That's showing a lot of good work when it comes to PTSD, to trauma work, to disentangling ways we feel about ourselves and kind of healing the body and the mind. And a microdose doesn't actually give you a feeling of anything. It's kind of working in the background.
Yeah.
So like I wouldn't be getting high by doing it, but I would see months down the road possible improvement in my depression and my anxiety and suicidal ideation that I deal with sometimes.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't block myself from a therapeutic modality because I'm in sobriety. Like I would never do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so
Probably
it's,
not the doses I did when I was in high school.
Yeah, this isn't like when I used to eat 4 tabs of acid and disappear for 12 hours. No, this isn't that.
and so,
It's
but go ahead, Jamal.
no, I just two things, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I think for me, there would have needed to be like intensive family therapy, because like when you're the one who's like the fuck up, everyone can point at you, but there's a lot more going on, So I think that's what it would have been needed for me. And then also I just want to put it out there because the I haven't like said anything about this tonight, but I just want to really be clear that like I am sober, I'm in recovery, but I am a harm reductionist. Like I believe in harm reduction. I believe in medication when people need medication, right? Like I don't believe in like cuz you'll hear some wild shit out there
Yeah.
of like, "Oh, if you take this, then that's not sobriety," whatever. Like no, like I believe in um so I just want to really like I've worked at the like at a needle exchange before, while I was sober, but because I think it's important if people are using that they have clean needles. I think if people are using, it's important that they have a clean supply, like these sites that have opened up in New York City. I believe in decriminalization and I'm an abolitionist at heart in terms of prisons. So I just wanted to really put that out there because even though I haven't said anything really either way about it, people can like project stuff onto people who are sober and
Yeah.
think like, oh, he's sober, so he believes this and this. And I just want to be really clear. Like, this is what I needed for me, like, cause I tried, a lot of other things. And that just wasn't going to work. So this is what I needed for me, but I know that other people can use drugs and be okay and can drink and be okay. Like that's just not me. That's just
Yeah.
not me.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you bringing that up. I too am a harm reductionist. Shout out to Clayton Rowley, who is here in Philadelphia. He runs Prevention Point, which is based in Kensington here, one of the hardest hit places from the opioid epidemic in the country. Right. And so he's out there on the front lines. Another, social worker. Again, we stay out in these COVID streets, man, doing the work that's necessary. But I completely agree. When Mike was talking about, as we get ready to wrap up, as Mike was talking about microdosing magic mushrooms, it brought to mind a post that I saw, and I believe I sent it to you all from Meek Mill, and I'm gonna post that there now for people to see. It's actually covering my face for those who are watching on YouTube and Facebook. He says, "I smoke weed every day and get depressed and I'm trying to read it. I smoke weed every day and get depressed. And soon as I get high, I'd be happy as hell sober. LOL. It just helps me think deeper and more realistic. I was confused by the post, and of course, this is has now been seen by millions. Right, this has been seen by millions, and I think he's in an interesting space where a few months ago I talked about him talking about therapy, right, and we saw a whole bunch of black clinicians posting about being resources for therapy for the community. And so I bring this up because, especially you know, and we talk about men and their vices, especially amongst black men. This idea of marijuana, which is heavily influenced by hip hop. We talk about, when I see him post about I smoke weed every day, it's not that you're microdosing marijuana. You're not microdosing CBD, right? You're not under the guide of a therapist, right? A psychiatrist or somebody. It's you're smoking a whole L to the face, right? And how detrimental and how problematic that can be to your wellness. And so when I see him write this and talk about, hey, I smoke weed every day, I'm depressed. Yeah, it makes sense, right? But I think there's conversations that are being had, but I don't necessarily know if it's the conversation, the right conversations, right? Because we're talking about weed, we're talking about CBD. I'm speaking of these specifically ones that I've been researching, but we're not talking about it and how it's influencing and impacting a community who's we talk about the benefits of these things, but we're not talking about a community who overindulges in it, right? Who overindulges in the marijuana uses, who are, as Chris was talking about his weed use, right? I know Chris wasn't taking a hit of the pen. No, it was like, okay, you know what? I'm either gonna smoke a whole L. I'm gonna take about 20 puffs of the pen, right? So it's important, but this knowledge, right? This information, it's not getting to the people that it needs to get to, right? And I guess that's one of the frustrations that I have with the white supremacist evidence based research, right? Because the research isn't, and the information isn't being it's not occurring with these marginalized and disenfranchised populations, and then the results aren't being disseminated to them, right? And so it becomes like a very niche type thing when we talk. That's why I hate all this shit. I was wondering how long it was going to take me to say it. Like, for those people who follow me, they know. All of this shit just upsets me and frustrates me because I'm gonna say that for another pod. Again, I could talk your head off, but I wanted to bring up that Meek post because again, here we have this young brother who's been again, as much as I have critique about him, he's been open and honest about his opioid use, about his marijuana use, and it's probably uncomfortable. That's why we see the LOLs that he puts in it, right? Because he's trying to mask something from it. So I know we got the hip hop social worker here, right? And so hip hop is something that's very important to you, right? It's for some of us, it's become who we are, right? A huge part of who we are. So can you just speak to? Because I know I sent it to you, Chris. I know I sent it to you, Shimon. I'm not sure if I sent it to you, Mike. But can you just speak to what you saw in that post?
So what I saw in the post was him trying to be honest, but like you said with the LOL, you know what I'm saying? That's how we kind of mask our, saying like, I don't want to be too serious because I don't want you to see that I'm actually hurting inside. I'm just letting you know a little bit that, hey, I feel different when I'm sober, but but weed is actually not as cool as I once perceived it to be. You know what I'm saying? So that's why I feel like the LOL is there because I mean you might think it's funny, but I feel like we also have this thing in our culture that we can't really show vulnerability, and maybe he's not there yet. You know what I'm saying? I know he's probably further along than he used to be, but that doesn't mean he's all the way there. So and yeah, I don't know, something about men that saying like smoking weed, man. That's just when I was really in it. I mean, it was part of my identity. You know what I'm saying? I showed up high. I like to drive high. You know what I'm saying? I just was. It just was something that I did. You know what I'm saying? And it was really kind of embarrassing to admit that I had an issue with it. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like, he's asking for help, but at the same time, he's not saying that he needs help. You know what I'm saying? But he's like, he's tweeting. He's probably high when he's tweeting. You know what I'm saying? And he's like,
Yeah. I don't want to
you know
laugh,
what I'm
but that's
saying?
what I got from it.
right, like I need some help, but at the same time, I'm still that dude. You know what I'm saying? Bravado. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I feel like he was asking for help. You know what I'm saying? Probably got a little too lit, and because I definitely had times where I got high and felt sad, and I was getting high to avoid that feeling.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But
Don't you hate that?
I would
Hated that.
right. You know what I'm saying? I would get high or get scared. Man, that was the worst. Get high, and get scared. So yeah, I feel him. He's asking for help. I think so, but he's not really in the spot to where he wants to detach from it all the way.
Yeah. And I would get your thoughts too, Mike and Shimon, if you have someone. But I saw, my big, the therapist in me would take away was, yo, I enjoy being sober, right? And so I can imagine just what a tweet, a post of that what that could have meant, right? Because I know firsthand what the Xanax use was because I had kids. I tried Xanax because the Meek said it in the song, right? So I can only imagine if he just said, "Yo, I enjoy being sober," what that looked like. But as you said, this is a journey that he's navigated, and unfortunately, he has the gift and the curse of living his life out loud, right, in front of everybody, which brings a critique, right? Which brings critique. Mike, Shimon, did y'all have any comments on it at all? Thoughts on it at all?
Yeah, I mean, this is more speaking to your characterization before talking about the tweet. It made me think about my guys at high school, right? That specifically one kid that every day just comes in smelling like a blunt, right? So me being also harm reduction model, I want him in school more than I don't want him in school, right? And so the conversation I have with him is kind of, it has to walk a line, right? Because I try to help him see that like sometimes we got to move in silence. Like you don't want to walk into a room and broadcast that like, hey, I smell of weed and everybody's going to smell it now. Like that's just not a smart move generally. And then like I really talked to him about it and I asked him point blank, I was like, why do you smoke? And he was actually able to be aware enough to say that when he was a ninth grader, he did it as an escape. Like he had the awareness of that, the recognition of that. And that now he does it because he feels like he's able to participate more. And he does show up to school more, right? And he's more lively in class. So there's this line of me trying to be like, trying to help him see the relationship, right? And it definitely comes back to this idea of vulnerability. I mean, that's my common theme with my guys at my school is shoulders always up, armor always on. And so I'm sure like the weed plays into that too, because that just adds to that cover. Um, but yeah, it's tough. It's a tough line to walk because I want them in school no matter what. I'm never gonna have a kid go home because they smell of weed. Never
Yeah,
gonna happen.
yeah. Shimon, I'll give you the final word before we wrap this up, if you have any.
I mean, when I was that kid, so like I remember in high school there was some like drug counselor at our school, and my friends would actually like go into a group with him. Like they like would go and meet with the drug counselor, and I thought it was the most ridiculous thing ever. I was like, why would you want him to know what you're doing? I just like I think I was just like I'm not doing that. I think finally I went one time and I was like this is not for me. But it was like you're basically disclosing that like that's what you do, you know? Um that's just what I was thinking about when Michael was, talking about high school. And so I don't know if I don't know if I
Yeah.
answered your
No, no, no.
question, if I went into something
No,
else.
no. It definitely makes sense. How you relate to that, because when we look at different things, right, it resonates with us differently, right? And so, no, I definitely appreciate the candor. I appreciate the candor from all of you tonight. I feel like again we can do this for hours on end. I definitely will want you all back so we can have this radical social work blow the whole shit up conversation that needs to take place, social work education and just the profession in general, the NASW, who will never see a red cent of my money. Right, I'll pay student loan before I get NASW money. But I ain't giving neither of them. But but I digress. Listen, fellas. I appreciate you all for coming through. Shimon, Mike, Chris, thank you. This means a lot. The reason why I do, and I know I have some first time viewers who are tuned into Rhetorically Speaking. This is also a part of a podcast that I do called hashtag You Good Man, a Men's Wellness Podcast, which is on all platforms, and this will be uploaded on Wednesday, right? And it's to have these conversations specifically for people who identify as being men, speaking to our issues, whether it's this idea of unhealthy masculinity, unlearning different things, taking care of ourselves physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. And this is the reason why it's all men on the show today. But I needed this, right? I always talk about when I go to speak, when I go do whatever, like first and foremost, this is for me, right? This is cathartic for me. Hearing, being able to be transparent and vulnerable. I might be more vulnerable in this space than I am when I'm sitting in silence, right? Listening to you all in your different paths, whether you have quote unquote less time or more time in your individual journey, this all is data for me, right? And it all helps me process my feelings in an authentic manner, right? So I appreciate you all for coming through. I appreciate those of you who are tuned in on the chat. Again, hit that subscribe button, hit the share button. So I ain't gonna beat the YouTube algorithms. I know that's not gonna happen, but the people who needed to hear this, they're gonna hear it, right? I'm a firm believer in that. And so before we wrap up, I want to give Shimon and Chris, because I know Mike, Sisyphean Absurdity is not on Instagram right now. Right, he on hiatus, so I want to give Shimon and Chris the opportunity to promote what it is that you're working on and how people get in contact with you. We can start with you, Shimon. Seeing as though the Celtics done blew this lead, I know you upset.
Oh my god.
Oh, I feel good, so good about this
Everyone,
right now.
keep the Jays and Rob, and everyone else can go. Thanks for having us. I think this is an important conversation, and these conversations fuel me, so I appreciate that. Like, this was awesome. Like, I could talk about this for hours, what we did, but we could talk more.
Right. I'm all hungry over here, like starving.
I know, me too. I didn't get to eat before we went on. Yeah, so on Twitter, I've got 2 accounts. I've got at Shimon D. Cohen is me, and I tweet about different social work stuff and political stuff, and then sometimes some personal stuff. And then Doing the Work Pod is my account for my podcast. And my podcast website is www.doingthework.com, and it's available on all podcast apps, Spotify, and I interview people who are doing the work. So I actually had a new episode come out tonight about whitewashed social work history. That was the topic of the episode that's out tonight, so hopefully people will check that out. And there is an Instagram account, Doing the Work Pod, as well, and Facebook too. So thanks.
No doubt. How about you, Chris? I'm limiting you 2 pods. You can tell us about 2 pods to tune into.
So if you want to just go to hiphopsocialworker.com, that's pretty much everything you need to know about me there. I don't really do the Hip Hop Social Worker podcast as much. I kind of let that be kind of what it is. But I do have a new podcast with me and another social worker talk about things that aren't social work. I feel like it's something like it's an avenue to kind kind of humanize myself. You know what I'm saying? I feel like, like we get in these spaces where we have to like always kind of show up as professionals, and I do more than that. You know what I'm saying? I am more than that, so but that's it's called out the office, so yeah, that's what I'm doing right now, and I'm trying to continue to build out my career to something that looks incredible for my own sense of self-worth and how I deal with that. So yeah.
Well, as always, y'all can definitely hit that subscribe button, that share button for the hashtag You Good Man podcast, available on all streaming platforms. I try to come out with a new episode on a weekly basis. We gonna see. Again, I gotta go how I'm feeling energetically. Same thing with Rhetorically Speaking. I will be back tomorrow on Rhetorically Speaking live on YouTube and Facebook, talking with Michelle Williams, who is the author of Little Z and Firefly, which is a children's book geared towards helping children. We talk about coping. We talk about navigating their socio-emotional wellness. So she will be on tomorrow at 8 o'clock. I'll be on at 7:30 because there's some things that's happening in this world that I use this platform to really talk my ish, right? And so I just saw something that says that the U.S. government is going to be mailing out COVID testing kits via snail mail, right? So I have some thoughts about that. Also going to be just talking about the Antonio Brown situation. I haven't had it. I've been salivating, but I wanted to give it time to breathe because we needed time to let that breathe. There's so much happening with him. So you can catch me again. You can catch me on these platforms, man. I appreciate you all for taking the time to tune in. I haven't had a 2-hour episode in a very long time. So thank you all, Shimon, Mike, Chris. Thank you much. You can go watch that national championship game. You go, lick your wounds from the Celtics losing and the Blazers about to lose to the Nets. Sixers won tonight. Yeah, well, they blowing the Rockets out, right? But it is
Tatum
the
just
Rockets.
tied it with 1 second left.
Oh, wow.
It's going to OT.
Well,
against a horrible team. Seriously.
That's the game. That's interesting.
Thank God for sobriety. Thank God for sobriety. I can feel the pain of every Celtics loss, with every cell of I have.
Word. And that's an interesting conversation that I heard earlier on another podcast, the Bomani Jones podcast that I listen to religiously. It talked about sports not feeling the same, right? And I don't know, maybe that's something we'll talk about tomorrow. Matter of fact, that is. We're going to talk about that tomorrow, so I encourage everybody to come through. Until next time, peace.